You're listening to the Voice of the Andes, HCJB in Quito, Ecuador. You're listening to Passport. From Quito, Ecuador. For good shortwave listening, keep tuned to HCJB, Quito, Ecuador, and Passport.
Thank you, Ben Cummings, and welcome back, international friend. It's great to gab across the miles like this, not only giving out from here, but hearing from you as well. This is your pal Paul saying, keep those cards and letters coming in, friend. They're great help and encouragement, like that bright sun and the clear blue sky we enjoyed so much today. Both cases warm us clear through, your letters and the great space heater. Our address at this spot under the sun is a great big post office box numbered 691 at Quito, Ecuador. We hope you'll want to keep it warm with your letters, too. That address again, box 691, Quito, Ecuador, South America. At least don't let any spiders' webs form over the aperture, okay? Summer spokesperson Heidi Losby stands up to speak for the spiders, however.
Will you walk into my parlor so the spider could fly? It's the prettiest little parlor that ever you did spy. The way into my parlor is up a winding stair, and I have many wondrous things to show you when you're there. The spider's parlor spoken of in the old nursery rhyme is a wonderful place. It's made of fine silken thread. The garden spider weaves 3 kinds of threads, which are secreted in 3 separate glands from its little body. In constructing its little parlor, the spider finds 2 secure places, weaves his strongest thread, and fixes the end at one of these points. Then, like an acrobat, he swings with the thread to the other point and secures it there. From the horizontal thread, the spider spins a vertical thread. By this means, a center is fixed. The rotating lines are formed and secured at their ends. The spider forms the web with a wonderful regularity. The threads are elastic and sticky. Spiders seem to have an instinct for knowing when a storm is brewing. They will go out and strengthen the main cords of the web so that they may withstand the storm. I watched a spider wait for a meal to come along one day. It hid itself on a little ledge above the web. Very soon a fly came along, not even noticing the fine web. The fly became so entangled in this web, it was hopelessly caught. The spider came from its hiding place and had a very tasty meal. On one occasion, a spider's web saved a man's life. A man was trying to escape from his enemies. He found a hiding place in a large brick oven. Soon after he got inside, a spider began to weave a web across the entrance. When the man's pursuers reached the spot, they decided that he could not have crept in, or the web would have been broken. They continued on, looking for the man. After they passed by, the man came out and escaped. We can learn many lessons from the spider. Satan weaves webs across our pathway. We fail to see them because they are of such delicate construction. Then, when caught, we try to get out of the web, but the more we struggle, the more entangled we get. The only way out is to ask God's help for freedom. The spider can also teach us perseverance. It doesn't quit on building its web, but keeps on trying. We are sure to find obstacles and difficulties in the way of life. If we put our trust in Jesus Christ, He will give us all the help we need. The following poem by A.M. Overton brings me great encouragement. My Father's way may twist and turn, my heart may throb and ache, but in my soul I'm glad to know He maketh no mistake. My cherished plans may go astray, my hopes may fade away, but still I trust my Lord to lead, for Father knows the way. There's so much now I cannot see, my eye is still so dim, but come what may, I still can trust and leave it all to Him. For by and by, the mist will lift, and darkness turn to day. When looking back, we'll praise his name, who led us all the way.
What he called the this news is States and the Soviet Union are said to have reached
A sure beacon is the Lord waiting for his children. Thanks, Heidi. We'll look forward to saying Heidi Ho again very soon. Meanwhile, let's look at a weighty and extensive imitation web spun by HCJB engineers to beam the best news to various sectors of the globe. Charles Gray is on the scene.
Our microphone today is right around a whole mass of wires, which of course makes up the steerable antenna, the latest concept of HCJB in antenna design. And we're talking with the man who's been the prime mover behind all this, Don Hastings. And Don, today is the big day for the steerable, isn't that right?
Yes, this is the day when we will be putting it on the air for the first time. Now, this is not the full-blown steerable in which we can actually steer the beam to different targets, but this is a temporary version in which we have a single direction. We'll be going out on a heading of 35 degrees, which will just about hit right down the middle of Europe. And on the 25-meter band, this is our first band, and then our plans call for right in the same space that we're looking at to put in a 16-meter dipole for the 16-meter band as well.
You know, none of this that we're looking at really makes sense to me, but I'm sure that everything has a purpose there, Don, and I don't doubt that for a moment. But what about sharing with our listeners just what we're looking at here?
Well, I was jokingly telling you before that I had a nightmare one night, and this is a result of that, but it isn't quite that. This is a 500 kilowatt dipole, and so it has to be slightly different from a normal one. And so as we look at it there, you can see there's a network of 2-inch diameter aluminum tubes connected to a big end cap. The problem that we run into on a dipole is that the voltage at the center, where we have a center-fed dipole, is transformed up to a very high voltage at the ends. And so at the power levels we're talking about, 500 kilowatts, we would have a high voltage and run the risk at our altitude here of a lot of corona problems on the end of the dipole. So this has been designed in order to prevent any kind of corona breakdown or anything like that. So that's the purpose of those big end sheets. Now, we're in a big high wind out here today, and I expect at any time the wind will catch one of those and it'll end up way over there on Mount Pichincha. But so far it's holding together. We finished up the matching and adjustments to it on Friday, and we're about to the point of getting the antenna switcher fixed up so that it will switch the transmitters into this particular antenna.
Now, Don, if I can just insert here, you have made some field tests on this with a meter.
We have done some scale model tests on this to see how it would work, and the impedance measurements I have made are in very good agreement with the model test that we ran on one of our roofs there in Quito. So I expect that it will work just fine. Now, you can see that there's more than just this complicated dipole. By the way, the dipole is actually a folded dipole. You can see that the open wire transmission line connects to the top two halves of that, and the bottom half is shorted. And so it's a folded dipole to get our impedance up.
Now, you might just mention the actual physical dimensions of that.
If I remembered them, but I don't quite remember. The 2-inch tubes are about 2.5 to 3 feet spaced apart in this arrangement, and that makes them look like one large diameter tube, and that's mostly to copy our scale model that I was making our tests on. And then, of course, I explained the big end caps there that are about 2.5 by 3 feet square. So that's what it looks like. Now, it's standing there, about 12, 15 feet in the air, and near us, not too easy to see here, in the with the sun not quite shining on the wires, is a reflector screen. This is all supported by those towers we're looking at. And this forms actually a corner reflector with the ground there, so that this dipole and its corner reflector aims all of the power from the transmitter up into the big steerable reflector there in the background that we're looking at. And then it's actually the shape of the big steerable reflector that will focus the beam then on Europe, give us our very high gain. Now, when I say steerable, I don't mean that this whole big structure moves. I mean that ultimately it will have that capability of having the beam steered by virtue of moving around inside the reflector.
Now, is actually this dipole arrangement, is that more or less what the final steerable dipole will be like?
No, it's not very representative of that. Where we're using 2 tubes there to simulate one large diameter aluminum tube, actually in the final model, if we went with this corner reflector type, and that's not sure yet, but if we did, there would be one tube. So the top where the open wire line is hooked on would be one large tube out to the big end caps, and then below there would be one large tube back again. And we had, if we use that type, it will be in a sort of a trombone arrangement in which actually we can extend the arms, make them longer for lower frequencies bands and shorter for the higher frequency bands. So that's the way it would be if we use that type. On the other hand, if it turns out to be feasible, as I expect that it will, to use a log periodic type, it will be very different from that.
I see. Well, Don, we'll have to get back with you on another program and talk a little bit more about this stereo, and we just want to thank you for sharing with us today on Passport.
You're listening to the Voice of the Andes, HCJB in Quito, Ecuador. And this is your passport to international good listening.
Before we leave the radio ranch completely, let's drop by one of the staff homes and say hi. Whoops, sounds like there's a minor problem at the Stanley domicile. Is that right, Ruth?
Mine. My V. Gilbert beers. That's mine, said Maxie. But I only wanted to look at your new book, Maxie, said Minnie. I don't care, said Maxie. It's mine. Things had gone that way all day. When Minnie had asked to listen to one of his records, Maxie had said, "No, it's mine." When she had picked up Maxie's cap from the floor, he said it again. "Mine. I'll get it." "Maxie," said Poppy Muffin, "that must be at least a dozen times I've heard you say mine since I came home. Sounds like you own the world." "But my things are mine," said Maxie. "Why doesn't Minnie stop bugging me?" Poppy thought for a moment. He said, "What would you think if God said that about all his things when you want to share them?" "What things?" Maxie asked. "Oh, such little things as sunshine, the clouds, the blue sky, the green grass, and a few hundred others," said Poppy. "Why don't you think about that a little?" Maxie was quiet the rest of the evening. Poppy was sure that Maxie must be thinking about the things he had said. That night, Maxie tossed and turned. He kicked the covers from his bed and tried to cover himself with his pillow. By morning, Maxie and his covers and pillow looked like a bowl of spaghetti on the floor. "You look tired, Maxie," said Poppy at breakfast. "Didn't you sleep well?" "No," said Maxie. "I had bad dreams." Just then, Minnie thought of something. "Oh, Maxie," she said, "I have to take something about the sea to school today. May I take one of your seashells?" "Sure, Minnie," said Maxie. "You can take more if you want." Poppy almost dropped his coffee cup, and Mommy almost poured the cream in Poppy's lap. They were sure that Maxie would say, "Mine." "Why don't you show them the driftwood I picked up at the beach, too?" Maxie asked. Mommy looked at Poppy, and Poppy looked at Mommy. Something had happened to Maxie. "Why the big switch?" asked Poppy. "Last night everything was mine. This morning you're giving the world away. Would you like to tell us something?" "Well," said Maxie. Maxie figured that was a safe way to begin when he wasn't sure what to say next. Nobody could argue with that. "It was my dream last night," Maxie went on. "First, I went down to the beach to play on the sand. But God said, 'Mine,' and pulled all the beach away. I tried to swim, but God said, 'Mine,' again, and pulled the water away." Maxie looked around. Everyone was listening to him as though he were a favorite TV program. "Every time I tried to do something, God took his things away from me," said Maxie. "Then when I tried to lie out in the sunshine, God pulled the sun away and said, 'Mine,' again. It was dark and cold and what?" asked Poppy. "And then I woke up on the floor without any covers on me," said Maxie. "Do you want to tell us something else?" asked Poppy. "Well," said Maxie again, "I figured that if God did what I had been doing, the world would be a terrible place. I guess he shares all his things here with me, so I should share my things with Minnie and with him." "Then you didn't have bad dreams," said Poppy. "Those were good dreams, for they helped you to do good things that please God."
There certainly are gobs of grabby goobers on this globe, all right, Ruth. Thanks for that little lesson. And you know, even if we explore the opposite end of the scale, we find that human nature is the same, as is the answer. Dave Breese explores the lives of some who had almost everything, and yet far from enough.
Most of us who live in the world of the 1970s have become convinced that there is a major key to happiness, and one way or another, it usually boils down to money. Some rather modestly say that if I could just pay my bills and have a little money in the bank, then I would be perfectly happy. Others at various levels pursue riches and are quite sure that the millionaires are most happy, and the billionaires even more. But that is where the illustration comes in. The billionaires have taught us something that we should never forget. Probably the best-known billionaire of our world was Howard Hughes. He lived his life on the high road of big money that included oil, airplane manufacturing, film producing, and a whole list of activities. He could buy the entire floor in any hotel in the world and use it as his temporary residence. Who will claim, however, that this man was happy? When the time came to die, he was friendless and forsaken, a troubled man who couldn't make it all the way to the hospital in his business jet. J. Paul Getty was another, and the death of Howard Hughes made him a very troubled spirit as well. Isolated by his billions, he died without the sure knowledge that he had a friend. He said that he would give all of his billions for one happy marriage. He tried it 5 times. These 2 men and hundreds of others should remind us that money of itself cannot bring happiness. I took a walk with a friend not long ago, and we walked past perhaps 18 houses that were worth from $500,000 to $1 million each. And he counted the lives of the people who lived in these houses. And he said, Dave, this family is broken up. This one has an alcohol problem. This one is deeply troubled by a son who is on drugs. And I came away with a new sense that this world's goods, that is money, not only does not inevitably produce happiness, but in a high percentage of the cases, it produces sadness, sorrow, despair. Money is not the ultimate key to reality. You know, we should know this because we have very good information on the subject. Jesus Christ, who gives us the best information available on any subject, he talked about the same thing when he said, man shall not live by bread alone. Now, what that means is not that it's wrong to have money and have bread, but that's not the whole answer to life. What did he say? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by the words that come from God. All of the human resources in this world cannot really produce happiness or life at its fullness. It is knowing God and having the presence of Christ in one's life that represents the only key to happiness. With all my heart, I say this, I have discovered Jesus Christ and accepted him as my Savior from sin. It's been the happiest association in all of life. I recommend the same to you. Are you looking for fulfillment, for happiness? If so, you're looking for Jesus Christ.
And by that happy road, we don't mean always just the frothy kind of happiness, but deep down joy that carries us through even the difficult times. Friend, if your road is consistently unhappy, if your road is consistently difficult, lonely, whatever the problem might be, Christ is the answer to that. We've proved him, as Dave Brees has mentioned, in his life, and can recommend him highly to you. That's what we say. He's the answer to the question, the void, the emptiness of your heart. So let him be Lord of all. Past, present, and future. This has been Passport from HCJB. We plan to be back tomorrow, same time, same place. telephone bill saying, we'll be looking for you too.